Welcome to the Perfect Place to Put a Practice podcast by Scott McDonald and DrDemographics.com, the best source of demographic, psychographic, and marketing information for professionals.
Hello, I'm Scott McDonald of Dr. Demographics, and today I'm going to be talking to you about a concept called the urban core. Now remember, our podcast is primarily dedicated to those who are trying to figure out the best places to start up or purchase a practice. And what I'm applying here is not just in one limited area in a city or in a municipality. It actually is a kind of place that you want to consider going. And I want to talk about those priorities with you now. Oh, I sure wish that I was the one who came up with all this data and analysis, but it was actually done by three really well-known demographers: Wendell Cox, Charles Blaine, and Joel Kotkin. All three are contributors to New Geography magazine and are brilliant men. By the way, if they have books come out, you'd be very wise to buy them. So much for my copyright problems. All right, now, I'm talking about a thing called an urban core. We all know that the downtown area is one which is equidistant to a large number of people who are either living or working in the area. You generally want to assume that they have education and money that they can pay and are willing to solicit services from doctors in upscale type practices. That's the generality. Now, they wrote a book called The Next American City, which is all about the very specific things that you want to be looking for in where to go to practice. Offering a combination of affordability, amenities, and proximity to large cities, but without the burdensome, heavy-handed regulations of local government that many of the social ills running around have. Now, you already know that the urban areas are showing a great increase in crime. They are also being remarkably expensive in many states. So I want to talk about specific areas to consider going to, and to tell you a little bit about what I consider the most important aspects of the demography of locations for doctors. Now, an example that they use as a model, which I think is very fair, is the Woodlands in Texas near Houston and Bridgeland, Texas. It's not that those sites have a large number of available office spaces, but they are the type of places that I think you should be looking. So you can find it on a map, and we're going to use that as what we're looking for as typical of a desirable site to look at. While these locations have inherent advantages, and some of them are income, reasonable growth, education, and so on, they are expensive, and the competition is getting worse in these locations. So my recommendation is that you move on these fairly quickly. Don't allow a lot of grass to grow under your feet. Now, we refer to this kind of an area as an urban core. It's the center of the metropolitan area. But really, the authors do not say that the urban core is the best place to go. They suggest it is the near core. And a near core place is usually one which has the characteristics of the downtown without the expense. But it is unfortunate you are going to find competition there. These near core locations can be found in every major city in America. But not all cities are built the same and are of equal value. Nevertheless, that type of place will return well on your investment in setting up a practice. Now, they said cities will continue to thrive, but they seem politically and economically not well suited for middle and working class families of all races, and I tend to agree with that. Some of the economic mix in these major metropolitan areas, and I'm going to throw out Chicago as an example, are doing much to make people not want to move there. The same thing is true in the Bay Area of California, San Francisco Bay Area, Oakland, it's not a place that people want to go. The expense alone makes it difficult, but also the availability of vacant properties is also tough. So while before I had once said the East Bay of California was a great place, now I'm being much more cautious in that recommendation. Cities will continue to thrive, they say, and they seem politically and economically not well suited for the middle and working class. So I'm saying, yeah, if you got a lot of really rich people, they can go to Portland or they can go to Seattle and do okay, but it's not a wise investment, particularly if someday you want to sell the property. In the end, cities will continue to offer great potential for aggressive practices. And I mean by that, those that want to grow and have a management tool or staff to help them. The larger a practice is, the more sophisticated its management needs to be, and the more money they have to put in external advertising. It's not something I love, but it's something that is true. And it's going to take some professional management chops and a lot of guts to be able to survive and thrive when there's so much at risk. These sites are going to require long leases, and they also are going to have high square footage fees. Now, going on in the future of the American practice, I believe that in the end, we're going to see the urban cores dominate, but always we're seeing a short-term benefit to suburban sites. These are the places that a dentist or a general practice physician will thrive. But if you want to specialize, you're going to have to be especially cautious in looking at a large geographic area from which you can draw. The more specific the practice offerings are, the more you're going to have to look at a radius that can support the patient base you want to have. Now, many American cities described as urban cores are functionally more suburban and exurban, that's the term, based on urban form, density, and travel behavior characteristics. So what a lot of people are finding when it comes to large practices, they have to find kind of a mixed place. It can't just be suburban, but it has to have some population density and growth to be able to support what you're trying to do. Urban cores are defined as areas that have population densities, well, high population densities of like 7,500 people per square mile, or in other words, 2,900 people per square kilometer. Now, one of the things that they're doing is they're promoting cycling and walking. They want to make these easily internally, so you can travel from one side of town to the other quickly. Draper, Utah is the one that I've talked about in the past, where it is going to be just a couple of miles, but it has a fairly dense population that is accessible through interstate transportation. Now, this was very popular before 1945. It's a model that is coming back, and I think at Dr. Demographics, we can recommend where those places might be to find that kind of sector that you're looking for. Median home construction is becoming more expensive in these urban sites. Nevertheless, they're going to return on their investment very well. All of these areas are defined by zip code tabulation area. So we're going to be able to identify the specific zip codes that you should consider to put the practice. In essence, I'm just saying this. City dwelling is not dead, but it is morphing into something different. It's not quite a city, and it's not quite the suburbs, and it's definitely not rural. They're mixed sophistication, meaning, in other words, they may have junior colleges, or they may have access to regional malls that make them worth going to. This is increasingly where the action is. Nearly all of the country's fastest growing counties are in the urban fringe, and that's the term that I'm using for the near core. By 2025, exurbs will have more people than in the cities that they are surrounding. Peripheral regions have been the big winners in what is called the Great Reshuffling, essentially an acceleration of the trend towards suburbs, smaller cities, and rural areas. Now, you're going to find that almost all these areas are not purely one or the other. The pure rural sites generally lack the population density that you're going to need. And sometimes the big cities bring with them all the problems of expense and crime. And so we have to look for a hybrid. Exurbs since 2020 have enjoyed a 37% growth in migration and price increases, twice the national average. The most impressive performance was that of planned communities, whose growth has outpaced other suburban forms. Fundamentally, I'm a believer in the suburbs, but I believe you have to find a planned community that will offer transportation accessibility and retail for you to survive. I believe that growth is always going to be an important factor, but it's not the only factor when it comes to these near urban fringe locations. Now, the fate of losing population to suburbs is going to continue, and it's going to get faster. A lot of cities have rather ignored the suburbs and have been dismissive of them. But to find a good growing suburb is always going to be a good idea because it's offering a lower cost per square foot than you're going to find in other circumstances. Now, urban cores like Chicago have traditionally been great. Northern Chicago area has been particularly good. But they've done almost everything they can by raising taxes and property values to make it undesirable for the average practice to want to go there. So they're scaring people away. The same thing I'm noting in the East Bay of Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area, is that they want to scare people away and say, you're not cool enough for us. That is a bad situation. It tends to make the property less desirable for people who are not incredibly wealthy. Now, I've got nothing against the wealthy, but they don't exist in most places in sufficient numbers to support a practice. Therefore, finding a middle class location and hanging on to that long enough to achieve some benefit with practice valuation is important. How long should you be in the practice that you're considering in these circumstances? Well, I would recommend at least 10 years is the ideal. It isn't that you have to stay there 10 years. It's that the practice must grow for 10 years in order to get a really significant value that will make it easy for you to sell at a significant profit. And that's the bottom line. You have to get a good return in your housing, good return in the workspace, good return on the practice itself you're in. Other professional practice sites with promise are coming on the radar all the time. So please do not become overly concerned. It would be wise for you to meet with one of our people on the phone or on a computer call to have us tell you what locations are going to match your personal priorities. It isn't just like there's a one-size-fits-all way to think about these areas, but they are going to disappear. Now, at Dr. Demographics, I have two kinds of reports that I'm thinking you may want to consider. The first one is the quick view report. Let's say you've got 3 or 4 locations, not contiguous, that you want to consider, should we put a practice here and will it return well on the investment? We can go through the psychographics and the demographics, as well as the competition analysis, to say there are not too many other doctors offering the same services. Another service we have is called the marketing report. Yes, it is useful to use this as the spine or the founding document of your advertising and public relations efforts. The marketing report will list the dominant lifestyles within the area, and it will come back and bless your life for a very long time. So the prices and the samples are found on our website at Dr. Demographics. The drop-down menu has the prices. Please take a look at them so you can get an idea of what can be offered, and it surprisingly is not going to be that much money. But believe me, if you're making these important and expensive moves without having the data, you're going to be very sorry. This is Scott McDonald of Dr. Demographics. Please give us a call at 800-849-0499. We'll be happy to give you the samples and give you recommendations on what to look for. And thank you so much for watching.